My friends, good morning. Just like you, I woke up this morning to the news of an attack against Israel by Hamas, where they managed to launch a major offensive, literally of historic proportions, in the morning. And then this offensive was largely successful on the Hamas side because they were able not only to attack important targets, civilian targets, military targets, take many hostages, bring these hostages into Palestinian territories and spread them everywhere to make their release extremely complicated. And in fact, Israel is waking up today with a literal hangover. And I think we're only at the beginning of this story. We haven't seen the worst yet. We're only just starting to grasp the extent of the damage. So I'd like to give you maybe a few references to help understand what might have happened. Because right now, a lot of Israelis are asking themselves, what's going on? Why didn't the state see anything? Why didn't Mossad see it coming? Why didn't the army react? Actually, what happened is that we're dealing with a situation where very basic, archaic attack systems are being used against highly advanced systems. And unfortunately, that's absolutely unstoppable. I'll give you an example. It's October 2000. Off the coast of Yemen, it's an American ship, a destroyer, equipped with missiles and highly advanced defense and attack systems. Al-Qaeda wanted to target it using a technique that had failed a little earlier against another destroyer, but this time it would work. They managed to hit the destroyer, making a hole in it the size of a garage door. And they killed 17 sailors, 17 American servicemen, and they wounded dozens of others. How did they do it? How did they manage to attack this ultra-sophisticated system? Actually, they took a Zodiac, put two guys in it, 300 kilos of explosives, and then they rushed toward that ship. That means it's a ship that could have been perfectly safe if it had been attacked by a MiG, by a plane, by a missile, or something else. It could have protected itself. It could have protected itself from that. Except that in all its arsenal, it didn't have anything to protect itself against a simple Zodiac, all right? I to link this a little bit to what's happening today in Israel. If you look, the Israelis have spent on weapon systems, right? These systems, which are very sophisticated, will never be able to respond to attacks using basic means, rudimentary means. They are being attacked by a swarm of mopeds. They could have responded if they were attacked by a tank or by planes or something else. They could have responded. But can they respond to a swarm of mopeds? You see what I mean? They could have responded to planes, but can they respond to paragliders, hang gliders, ultralight aircraft? Extremely slow aircraft flying at 30 kilometers per hour just above the ground, can they defend themselves against that? You see, modern systems are very often at a disadvantage compared to extremely basic and rudimentary systems, and that's something unstoppable. Secondly, the issue of distributing the hostages a little bit everywhere, that's going to... There is no simple solution to this. Let me tell you a story. In June, in the summer of 1985, there was a Boeing 727 plane from TWA, an American airline that no longer exists. It took off from Athens and it was hijacked. It went to several cities in the Mediterranean, including Algiers. And actually, it ended up in Lebanon. Once it arrives in Lebanon, what do the hostage takers do? They don't keep their hostages on the plane because they know that at that point everyone is focused on the same place, and sooner or later there will be an intervention by special forces or something. So what did they do? They took the hostages and spread them all over Beirut. One hostage here, one hostage there, one hostage over there, different places. What does that mean? It means that now you can't just do one operation against the Boeing 727 to free the hostages. At that point, you need 140 operations all carried out at the same time in parallel. That's not possible. That's what Hamas did. They used that technique. These are actually old techniques. There's nothing new under the sun. These are old techniques, but they work very well. The Mossad, the intelligence service, I think it's affected by the same flaws as all the intelligence services in the world. Here in the United Kingdom, the police and all that are now thinking about male menopause. Seriously, you heard that right. They're thinking about how to deal with the issues of male menopause. Disconnected from reality, All right? That means they spend a large part of their time doing a certain job, and that's always the lot of the defender, the one who's on the defensive. He'll be waiting for an attack that won't come, and then gradually he'll start to lose focus and drift toward things that are completely unrelated to his mission. We see this in IT, for example. Take an attacker, a malicious actor. How many years does he spend preparing an attack, wanting to find the flaws in a system? He spends 100% of his time doing that. He's motivated, dedicated, and focused. What about the defender? The defender is in pointless meetings looking at his iPhone. The defender is doing training sessions sent by HR, just clicking next, next, next quickly. He's completely trapped by things that aren't at the core of his mission, but are very peripheral. And then he does his mission part-time. If you take the Outlook calendar of 10 random Mossad agents, I guarantee you that intelligence work is literally, let's be generous, 20% of their working time and energy. The rest of the time is just goofing off like everyone else. Whether it's in administration, intelligence, or business, in big companies or small ones, it's exactly the same. The title someone has on their business card, their work contract, or their Outlook signature, that title is what they're doing part-time, and I would even say very part-time. Whereas the attackers are motivated, dedicated, and focused. They might stop for 5 minutes to pray or eat a shawarma, but the rest of the time they're very focused on their mission. So this will create an imbalance with, if they just manage to make sure that their digital footprint, the digital footprint of this attack, that means if they didn't use the usual things, like if they didn't use WhatsApp and the internet and all that and Google Maps and everything to prepare, if they didn't use that kind of technology, if they just went for technologies as basic as their mopeds and their ultralight aircraft and their drones, they're teased, they've been provoked. It's Julian. Still strong, still with payment. There is practically no more field intelligence. This video, Brandy, results for a long time. Today, intelligence is electronics. Today, it's about honor. Who gives them to you in a way of speaking, a way of phrasing. They don't go on Google, they have databases and all that, but in the end, if it doesn't show up in the database, well, it goes nowhere. So the motivation of Hamas seems pretty obvious to me. We'll see later, but at this stage, it seems pretty obvious. Look, Hamas isn't really interested in the attack itself. Yes, the attack is on a large scale, that's clear. There's a lot of barbarity, of course, because since they know they won't be able to take any significant or important military objectives anyway, so what do? They will compensate, as Islamists often do. They compensate with barbarity against civilians displaying bodies and so on. They do things that make you wonder if you're seeing humans or something else. So they go extremely far to make a significant psychological impact, but that's not what interests them. They are interested in how Israel responds. They want Israel to retaliate, and the harsher the response, the better for them. Why? Because they're in a situation where they're literally risking their lives. Let me explain. Hamas is to the Arab Muslim world what Zelensky and Ukraine have quickly become to the Western world. All right, that means for generations they've been receiving money, they've been receiving support and all that. And we get this impression when we look at the various Arab Muslim capitals, it feels like a new day is starting to take shape, where Hamas feels more and more excluded from the new situation. You see, that means we're going to see honeymoons, for example, between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and then we'll see a rapprochement where it was unimaginable before. When I was a teenager, never could we have imagined that one day we would see a rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. It's a reality now. So Hamas is afraid that gradually, piece by piece, the Arab Muslim world will turn its back on it. It has lost support and people are abandoning it. And then everyone starts exchanging favors with Israel, flights, embassies, business contracts, and all that. And many Arab Muslim countries, including Saudi Arabia, want to go in that direction. Because in the end, giving money to Hamas and supporting it for generations leads nowhere. So they want to move toward a future where this issue is completely out of their sight. All right? So what does Hamas want? Well, it attacks Israel. What it wants is for Israel to retaliate. The more brutally Israel retaliates, the better it is, because it allows for images of civilians, dead children, and all that, and this will come to the forefront. Whose eyes will see this in particular? Well, it will be seen by the Arab street, because when that happens, the Arab street will completely forget today's attack. Today's attack will already be forgotten. They will only remember the retaliation, and literally people will say or act as if Israel has unilaterally, coldly, and for no reason carried out an attack. It wasn't a response. They won't talk about a response. They'll just talk about an attack. So, the ramp to become will suddenly, which tended to forget this story, well, it doesn't really forget, but it kind of slips out of it's no longer immediate, it's no longer just there, present, it's no longer emotional, because it starts to fade a bit into the background compared to other concerns. There, suddenly this story will come back to the forefront. And so the Arab leaders, well, this time will have to think twice before getting involved in stories about Israel, before getting involved in agreements or negotiations or trade deals or diplomatic relations or anything else. They won't be able to anymore. Why? Because they'll be held accountable by their own people. Their people will say, look at what Israelis are doing to Palestinians. You can't normalize with that state. That's the point. And that indeed will allow Hamas to survive, to continue to exist for a longer time, and to gain more support. In any case, the Israeli strikes that we can imagine, I don't know how Israel will respond. Are they going to make incursions? Are they going to launch a few missiles like in the old days when a bus would explode somewhere? They would launch missiles. It would last a few months. Then they would stop. We'll have to see. I don't know what the scale will be. I tend to believe that this time there is a bigger escalation. You know, I feel like we're not in the same mindset as before. I don't know. We'll have to see. But the reality is that the leaders of Hamas who are pushing for this are literally pushing their people into a sacrificial logic. So we attack to receive the maximum number of missiles in return. Well, those people won't be involved in the retaliation. Literally, it won't affect them. Why? Because for the most part, I've seen stories like that a few years ago. A refusal of the ceasefire by Hamas while the Palestinians were getting missiles dropped on their heads. And actually, the one who refused the ceasefire, the boss of Hamas, he was in a big palace in Qatar in a suite, and he was riding an exercise bike, watching with a towel on his back like that, on his shoulders, watching the news on a big television. And then he said, no, we don't want a ceasefire. But of course, he doesn't want a ceasefire because the fire isn't falling on him. Anyway, he doesn't want a ceasefire because he's never seen the fire, right? When he sees fire, it's when he's in a restaurant and there's a chef cooking his steak. That's the only time he sees fire, him, right? So, and what he also sees is indeed the support from the Arab street. And of course, that will be accompanied by donations and everything. So it's the perfect crime in a way. He starts the whole thing from afar and then he watches on TV to see how it goes, right? It's a big game of, how should I say, a kind of chess game, right? But where human life is worth nothing, that's clear. You noticed that the person at the bottom is just an expendable variable, just a pawn. If they need to be destroyed, well, they are destroyed. And anyway, it will move the agenda forward. There you go. It's a very cynical game. Anyway, thank you, my friends, for watching this video this far. I'll come back if I have any updates or new thoughts or analysis, and I'll leave you now. See you next time.